The next subject is a report from Bloomberg, which is that Meta has resolved to pull down posts that mention Zionists and Zionism, especially when they're used in the context of what they believe to be a substitution for Jew or Jewish. They're proposing that this is being used really as anti-Semitism in disguise. Their argument is, hey, this is kind of just an alternative word that is being used to get around claims or charges of anti-Semitism, and they're going to tighten their moderation policies about this. Now, I think on the face of this, and if you look at TechMeme, all of the posts that are responding to this article are all basically enthusiastically in agreement that this is a good idea. And, just to give the audience context, they may have not heard all of our back catalog. You have an Israeli background. I have a Palestinian background. We both grew up in Australia. I was born in Australia. We had a very frank discussion about the whole conflict many episodes ago. That wasn't actually intended to be an episode. It was just a conversation between us that got accidentally recorded, literally, and we published it. I think we're both great friends, and there are many, many examples of Jews and Arabs who are great friends. And so this is really not about that. I think the other bit of context here is, it's worth me saying specifically, since I am not the Jew in the conversation, is that anti-Semitism is real and is disgusting and is intolerable and has led to some of the worst atrocities in the history of mankind. But what I think is also true is that some proportion of claims of anti-Semitism are false. Some proportion of them. And that claim has been weaponized to end debate and to silence debate and dissent. And so I think it's important to point out that this decision by Meta is in a broader context of claims against Meta, that they are in fact silencing debate about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And these are claims from Human Rights Watch and from other very reputable outlets that are saying, either as official acts by Meta, or in some cases as unofficial acts by employees at Meta, anti-Israeli or pro-Palestinian voices are being subdued, suppressed, minimized, shadow banned, pick your language. It's a real phenomena that some have observed, including employees who've left and sued Meta for this going on. And so I think I just want to put in context, using Zionism as a proxy for Jew or Jewish hate and anti-Semitism is obviously not appropriate. But I worry about the broader theme of Meta dampening or softening or suppressing legitimate political debate in this sphere, and which actually I have seen myself anecdotally, just to go beyond the headlines. I think it's destructive and divisive and concerning for general free speech everywhere.
Okay, let me get a bit personal for a moment here. So I've led a pretty charmed life. I've heard about anti-Semitism and all the experiences people have, and I've been some combination of lucky and maybe oblivious and never really experienced much or any of it personally. Since October 7, I have never been so aware of its reality. And if you go onto a platform that doesn't do perhaps what Meta is proposing to do or already doing, such as Twitter, it is pretty horrific what you see on there. The absolutely bald-faced, Nazi-aligned propaganda and opinions that are being freely shared and reshared and liked on there. I'm like, oh, damn, this shit is real. There really are people who think this stuff. And yes, if I go onto Twitter, I'd say 9 times out of 10, the word Zionist is not some discussion of a sort of socio-political philosophy. It is a way of basically saying Jews bad. And so I have a lot of sympathy or empathy for Meta and the position they're in, because what's happened here is that, yes, it is possible to have a proper, meaningful political debate and discussion, as you say, Chris, and to criticize Zionism as part of that, but the term has been weaponized. And when a term like that gets weaponized, then you have a problem. And it's funny, just to sort of draw maybe what's a bit of a funny analogy, but I think it's relevant, right? Like, again, growing up not in the USA, this whole idea of you can't wear blackface, I never understood that, right? Because I'm like, what if I'm going to a costume party and I'm a huge fan of, I don't know, Eddie Murphy. So I want to dress up as Eddie Murphy. And Eddie Murphy happens to have a certain skin tone that doesn't match mine. So why can't I put some color on my face so that I look more like him? Because the whole point of dressing up is to look like someone. There is no act of hate there. It's an act of admiration. And then I guess I learned over time that the problem is that blackface, the act of making your skin darker like that, was weaponized for a long time as a racist trope. And so even though it's not fair and it's a bit silly, you just don't get to do that. And unfortunately, what seems to be happening with the term Zionism is not dissimilar to that. So my issue, Chris, is that I agree it would be nice to have reasonable debates on Israel-Palestine, but I just don't see many of them happening. It's become a sort of another just weapon in the sort of culture wars, and I see no meaningful debate, just inflammatory yelling across the trench. So I've kind of opted out of most of this stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, I must say, actually, also, prior to October 7th, I have also been fairly charmed and oblivious to any sort of racism against me for having a Middle Eastern heritage, maybe being confused for Muslim, although I'm not. I'm an atheist and was raised Christian, and kind of obliviously proud of and enthusiastic about and believed in kind of the global rules-based system. And since October 7th, I've also kind of had the scales taken from my eyes, if you will. It feels like the double standards are so obvious. Just simple word choices like killed versus murdered or defend versus attack. What is covered, for example, there are so many things, atrocities covered by Israeli media that are not covered by Western media, that what's chosen to be covered and not covered. Rules-based systems from the UN, resolutions ignored and courts derided. This has become so real and so visceral and so heartbreaking and it just kind of has completely shifted my worldview. I also, as you said, have a lot of sympathy for Meta. You know, we've had whole episodes where I'm the lone wolf defending Meta's difficult job of moderating its scale. And very few people agree with me. I'm just like, you try moderating a massive billion-person community and getting it right every time, and I just think it's an impossible job to do well and without upsetting everybody.
Yeah.
Are there people using Zionism as a proxy for Jewish? Sure. But I think it is a legitimate debate and a legitimate concept to engage with Zionist extremism the same way as it is to deal with Muslim extremism, the same way it would be to deal with right-wing extremism and left-wing extremism in the US. I think these are important concepts that are causing a lot of pain and suffering, and in the extreme are dangerous and destructive. That conversation, you said it's nice to have. Yes, sure, it'd be nice to have reasonable debates about this. No, I would say it's essential to have reasonable debates about this.
Yeah, but they're not happening. That's my point.
They're not happening, but I can't imagine a world where it would be okay to ban using terrorism as a proxy for Muslims or Muslim extremists as a proxy for Muslim, or...
I actually do. Imagine, because this is sort of what's happening. Imagine a world where the Muslim community in a Western country gets referred to as terrorists.
I mean, that was the world for a long time after 9/11 and still to this day in large swaths of America and other places. I mean, that's still the world.
Yeah, and that's unacceptable. And I'm fully supportive of any kind of censorship on social media of that conflation.
But that's the point I'm making, is that there isn't any. There is no way to talk about Zionist extremism without saying the word Zionism. And therefore, to make that a watchword that is, let's say, difficult to use or a subject of increased scrutiny has a chilling effect.
It does. And you know, again, there is a cost to this. A
real cost.
Let me make 2 points. So one is that, again, on Twitter, where the censorship doesn't happen, 99 times out of 100, when I see the word Zionist, it is not used to discuss the land grabs being performed by Zionist extremists in the West Bank. No, it's being used to refer to either Jews in general, or in particular, Jews who support the ongoing existence of a Jewish state of Israel. So that's the context in which this is happening, right? And then the other thing is, what I'm seeing here is just an increase in tribalism from the types of discussion that are happening on social media. And I heard this term a few weeks ago called October 7 Zionists, and that refers to Jewish people who were not particularly, who didn't, outside of Israel, who didn't particularly care much about the existence of Israel, didn't think much about the existence of Israel, were, maybe quite critical of many of the policies around the state of Israel. But then once they saw, I guess, the global reaction and the campus protests and the anti-Semitism on X and all of that, they suddenly felt actually polarized towards Israel and more willing to kind of overlook the many transgressions that have happened and continue to happen and say, the most important thing here is that this country survives. And so I feel the pull of that. Like before October 7, I would have been focusing on the fact that Netanyahu is a horrible war criminal and that what's been happening in the West Bank is terrible and has been terrible for decades. After October 7, when I see the types of debates, the types of political positions lacking nuance taken by parties that have previously voted for, I'm like, damn, I gotta, I'm not gonna stand by while people say that Israel shouldn't exist. And so my issue here is there are no constructive debates happening, that there has been this whole milieu has just turned everyone into a tribalist where you pick a side and generally it's your side, whatever your side happens to be based on your ancestry or anything like that. And I hate that that's happened to all of us. So yeah, I kind of feel there's healthy debate and there's unhealthy debate.
This is a tech show, and really the main point of bringing this up is about the tech and about the difficulties of managing platforms at scale or participating in the ecosystems in which these platforms affect, right? What I'm really wanting to point to, though, is there's no debate that using Zionist or Zionism as a proxy for Jew or Jewish and as a cover for anti-Semitism is bad, period, full stop. That's an obvious statement to make. The thing that I'm most interested in, though, is that this is part of a broader pattern of Meta to actually suppress this kind of debate and content in general.
Yep.
And again, I'll just give you some very simple examples. On Instagram, I look at a couple of kid videos, about children because my wife sends me cute kid videos, or she sends me some funny relationship memes, or I look up furniture for an apartment that I'm furnishing once, and my Instagram is flooded with kid videos, relationship videos, and furniture videos. I can tell you my wife has sent me more than one video about Palestine and Israel. She's completely heartbroken and transfixed by it. And my feed and hers has exactly zero content about Israel and Palestine, algorithmically recommended to her. And in fact, the opposite. Some channels that she follows are not shown in her feed. I'm saying this, you call it a conspiracy theory, you call it what you will. There are articles from major institutions and employees who are claiming this is a real phenomena. And there are other articles, again, from legitimate institutions, I won't go through them all now, claiming that actually that the TikTok banning phenomena is related to this, is that the TikTok is not engaged in this kind of moderation, and that's a reason why people are looking at it twice. That is a massive problem if there is, because again, I'm a defender of Meta. I'm a defender of my Jewish and Israeli friends. I'm a defender of free speech, well curated and well moderated. This just feels, anecdotally and through the official reports from official human rights watchers, it feels like there's something else going on and it's not good for our conversation.
I'm not sure I agree. And I think this is sort of the point. The fact that the two of us, who I think basically have similar politics, similar backgrounds, similar everything, different ancestry, find ourselves viewing this situation so differently, I think is highlighting the problem. And I don't think getting everyone's feed full of polarizing content on this is going to help anything.
But I don't think we actually do disagree, though. We might even agree that filling our feeds with it is not helpful. But I mean, I don't know that I want Meta making that decision, right?
But then go to Twitter. I mean, I guess that's sort of the point, right? That there is
no, but we don't
moderation is an editorial choice by definition.
Yeah, but I don't think Meta is like saying, well, geez, the polarization in the US about left versus right is really not helpful, so we're going to suppress arguments between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, I don't think it's for them to decide that certain conversations are helpful or not helpful, right? I mean, that feels like overstepping the mark.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question about moderation, and that goes back to some of the debates we've had before, Chris, which is like, okay, moderation is editorial, right? There is no line where you say, this is unacceptable hate speech and this is like totally reasonable debate. It is a continuum with lots of shades of gray. And so by definition...
But we're not talking about the kind of conversation. What I'm describing here is not the kind of conversation. I'm talking about the category or topic. So they're not, as far as I can tell from these articles, again, from Human Rights Watch and employees, former employees who are literally suing Facebook for this, and they're whistleblowers, they're not saying, hey, the moderation is too heavy-handed. They're saying the entire topic is being suppressed. That is an editorial step much further beyond like, hey, you can't yell fire in a theater or you can't violate some community standard. In any case, I suggest people check out the article, make their own decisions about it, and other articles related to Meta and their moderation or softening of the algorithmic amplification of this topic. It feels to me like, again, as someone who's defended Meta and the difficulty of moderating its scale, it feels like this is a good case study and something for tech founders, tech entrepreneurs, and all of us in the tech industry to have a think about. It feels like something we haven't got right yet.
I just wanted to make one final point, though, or reinforce a point that I've made, which is I have never seen another issue in which one's political position is so dictated by one's background. And that means it's devolved into pure tribalism. And that makes me really sad. And so, to me, it just doesn't feel like a safe topic, right? And I do think that it makes it a bit of a special topic just because of that. It's like, I can predict with near 100% accuracy what someone's position is going to be on this. You tell me their name. I include myself in this. I don't feel good about it.
I think that's mostly true, but not absolutely true. There are a lot of people on both sides calling for a peaceful, long-term solution and don't believe that the current situation is...
I don't believe that's the sort of conversation that's being suppressed, though, Chris.
I've not had a single algorithmically recommended story about this topic on Facebook, period. If I post something about it on Facebook, the engagement is 0. And if I post a follow-up post saying, hey, look at my previous post, it gets a lot of engagement and people go, oh, I didn't see that. I mean, this is just pure anecdotal. Obviously, it's not scientific. But if it wasn't bolstered by many articles from official sources saying, hey, this is weird, I wouldn't bring it up. And so it is weird. That's for sure. All right. As always, that's a very contentious topic. Those are our thoughts. What do you guys think? Join us in the comments. We'll join you down there. Let's discuss and debate it there. Please keep it civil because we're only looking for constructive conversation.